There's a lot of legal nuances with property management that people
Mhm.
aren't really aware of because they don't matter until something happens. And sometimes you can just have, no issues for a long period of time and think that, oh, this is easy. I just have someone sign a lease and they pay me and then I just send them non-renewal. There's a lot of little things that you can't do and you can't say and that you have to do and that you have to have on paper, um, that you just don't know right off the bat unless you go to some MHA classes or spend some
Mhm.
time really educating yourself. And that's
And
the
it's
benefit to
hyper
having third
local too,
parties. And
right?
it's
Like
hyper local
it's
too.
hyper local. The
So
ordinances in St. Paul, Minneapolis are going to be different than in Minneapolis, just across, or St. Paul, Minnesota, across from Minneapolis here, or
yeah,
it's going to be different in Johnson City. So you really need to know like what's your local ordinances, the state rules, the federal rules. And honestly, it can be really hard to come by a lot of that information because you don't know what you don't know. So you don't even know what to go out there and Google or what questions to be asking a lot of times.
Mhm.
yeah,
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 another tidbit quote somebody threw out the other day was there's there's generally two times you look at a contract: when you sign it and when you want to sue somebody.
yeah,
Yep,
And
that
you could
sounds
be
right.
on the receiving end of that as well. So you're absolutely right about the legal side of it.
mhm,
It is a highly regulated, I don't know, highly. It is a regulated business, and
yeah. But there's just a
there.
lot of administrative things that a newbie wouldn't think to do that actually really matter if you have to go to court for something, or if you try to evict someone and then find out you did it the wrong way, you didn't provide enough notice, and all of a sudden you get to court and you don't have a leg to stand on. Where if you had a property manager, they'd tell you, oh, you have to fill out, this move-in sheet and this move-out disposition, and if you don't have these things, you can go
Mhm.
to court and this person might have done some really illegal stuff. It doesn't matter because you don't have this one thing on paper. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that you're just not going to know as a newbie, and
And
someone
the
who's
consequences can be really high.
Yeah.
yeah,
Not just a matter of like, oh, you can't evict them now, but like, oh, you actually discriminated against this person and now
now
they're
you're getting sued.
countersuing you. Oh, great.
Yeah, yeah,
And to your point earlier, Anthony, that's a very jurisdiction centric thing.
hmm,
Hmm.
If you're in a tenant friendly state, um, it's probably a much higher bar on the education and compliance side for self management than if you're in whatever, pick your favorite owner friendly state.
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
So you
Interesting.
guys, have you, during this whole self-management process, now you have 100 doors under your belt, who did you lean on? Who have you leaned on, at least to get to a certain point? Has it all been trial and error? Has it all been, oh my gosh, we should have done this. Thank goodness they didn't sue us for discrimination? Or how have you arrived at where you feel like we have a good foot on the ground? We feel good about the direction we're going. We treat people fairly. People want to live in our property. How have you gotten where you are as far as that goes?
Yeah, I mean, I lean on my head property manager right now. So when we say we manage everything in house, that doesn't mean that Anthony and I are running around to properties collecting rents and fielding maintenance calls. We just have employees on payroll that are our employees that do this for us. So we've got Mike, our lead property manager. He's got, I think, at least 15 years experience of being a property manager in this area. And so he's kind of my go-to guy for any um, you know, administrative leasing issues, right? That process that I mentioned of, okay, when you move someone in, you got to go through the checklist. They've got to sign this. They've got to fill this out. You've got to have this move out disposition and, all this stuff. He's the one who I lean on for those processes to make sure those are done well. Then we've also got a really good attorney that handles our standard lease and makes sure that that is appropriate and helps us update it when things change, like COVID. There's going to be different different things called out in the lease now that we've gone through COVID.
Mhm.
One in particular is like force majeure. That's something that I'd never even heard of until COVID. And then when this popped up, we started to realize, okay, there's a little bit of a weakness in our leases here. If some sort of event like this pops up, we need to have a provision here that says that, yeah, okay, you still do owe us rent even when, this type of stuff happens. So
Mhm.
having a good attorney for that piece, to make sure that all our leases and any just weird nuances that pop up that I have a question on, having a really strong real estate attorney that knows your area. And then if you're doing in-house, either go and take all the classes yourself to learn all the laws if you really want to do that, or hire someone that's got that experience. And that's been our strategy, is to hire the talent that can.
Yeah. A guy with 15 years experience, sounds like you were very intentional, and you just gave us a great tidbit of, I don't want to go figure all that stuff out on my own. I don't want to learn it. I want to pay someone to do it, period.
Yep.
And I want to
Yeah.
take the financial brunt up front as we continue to create more cash flow in order to get to that point, because it's not worth saving that dime and penny
Yeah.
for possibly getting sued.
Yep.
Yeah. So the mix that's worked for us as far as headcount's concerned so far, and what I seem to hear from most other operators out there who have done this, is about one property manager and one maintenance guy per 100 doors. That seems to be the mix that works.
Okay.
Now that's going to differ if you're just if you're buying, brand new Class A stabilized assets versus value add Class C assets.
Right.
That might change it a little bit, but that's where we're at. We got a full-time maintenance guy. We've got a full-time property manager. We've got a part-time property manager that's on call, who we really haven't utilized in a long time. And the next hire more than likely is going to be I guess what we'll call a leasing agent to work under Mike, so he can do more project management, manage things from a higher level. That could be the person kind of running around doing showings and all that stuff, and some of the grunt work.
And
that's how we see it unfolding over the next couple months here.
Yeah, and I think this is really important when we talk about like in-house management versus third party and kind of weighing the pros and cons. It would be a mistake, I think, to think about in-house management as something that you, as the operator, the investor, are going to be doing yourself. Like, do you really want to bring property management in-house so that you can handle the leasing, the evictions, all that, the rigmarole that goes with that? Probably not. If you're doing it just to save a couple of bucks, you're going to be sorely disappointed. What you're really doing when you're bringing property management in-house is ideally hiring great people that can build the systems for you, or that you work together with to build those systems so that they're in a position to succeed. But, if you don't have experience doing the property management, then you go and you hire somebody who does have that. You put them into place and say, let's build this thing. How does this work? And so that's where the real difficulty comes, because if you've ever had a business where you've had to hire an employee, you know how hard it is to find good help. Like finding that person that is a rock star and they can build those systems. That's one in a million. And so I don't really have any good advice for how to do that necessarily. All I can say is that when you find that person who is a rock star, do whatever you can to keep them, because they will, fly you to the moon and back.
And that's one of the exposures of the integration, maybe at the smaller unit numbers, is that if you have a third party manager and they've got an office and 4 or 5 different leasing agents, and they lose one person, you're going to be fine, because they have other people that pick up that slack. If you lose Mike, or I can't remember his name already, you're going to feel a much greater impact than if you were still in the bullpen of a third party manager. So there is that exposure to,
Yeah. At that point, it comes back to me at this point, which like I'm still fine with, but that's kind of a risk that's inherent to doing that, is you're taking on a little bit more risk for yourself, in the sense that if Mike gets hit by a bus or just disappears to Mexico and never comes back, I've got to step in and pick up the slack and go find another employee.
And this is the case. This is the case with all small businesses, right? Like the owner is the stopgap. At the end of the day, if the cashier doesn't show up, well, it looks like you're putting on the smock, you're working the cash register, right? Or, like the stocking needs to get done. You go do the stocking, customer needs help, like you help them. And so that's the owner's role. They fill that. And so, but your goal, I think, is always to get to the point where your redundancy as an individual owner is not necessary, so that you have enough people in place, good systems there, so that if something does happen, there's another person that can step in. And so I think that's the difference between working on or working in your business. And I think a lot of people, when they're first starting out, they spend so much of their time and energy working in the business, just filling all those stopgaps, that they never get a chance to really work on the business. And so the sooner that you can really hire great talent, put them into those places, it allows you the freedom and the time just to pull out and really focus on the macro vision.
Yeah,
Great
and
advice.
also going bigger early or having bigger systems than you need initially. I think, Dan, it sounded like you went into,
Yeah, it kind of,
you didn't really, I don't know if you went with Appfolio or whatever out of the gate. You went with a system that was larger than your needs, but you
Yeah.
could grow into it rather than getting to 120 units and then trying to put that genie back in the bottle and fit it into a system. It is much easier. And these costs are not, we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars for software management or software for property management. I hate hearing people say, "Oh, I'm not going to use a lawyer for $3,000 on a $4 million purchase because they
That's a
want to
mistake.
save a few bucks." I'm just like, oh, and this is kind of one of those smaller versions of the same concept. It's just build it into the expense of your business and
yeah.
grow
And
with it.
the way I kind of looked at it as well is I use these types of things as motivating factors for growth, because if you start to hire staff, then all of a sudden you have a whole new incentive to go out there and continue to grow the business. Whereas if it's just you could take your sweet time, you can kick the can down the road and be like, oh, you know what, I don't feel like going out and deal hunting today. We'll do it next week. If you've got employees to support, then all of a sudden you're incentivized to a greater degree to not just go out and grow your portfolio for yourself, but to take care of those employees that you signed up to pay and provide benefits for. So it really increases the sense of urgency for growth. So I personally like to kind of get things a little bit before you think you would need them, or it
Before
makes
you're
financial
comfortable.
sense. Yeah, before I'm comfortable, because
Yeah.
then it just forces me to go out and get to that next level that much sooner.
That's
Well,
great.
and Dan mentioned it earlier, we like to think about what's our end state, what's our outcome, and then working backwards from there. So you have to grow with the end in mind. And if your growth, goal, if our goal is X number of units and that's, 10 times bigger than where we're currently at, then we need to be working to build systems that allow for that reality. Because what ends up happening is if you just are building the systems that work where you're currently at, those don't usually scale very well and they don't grow very quickly. And so they can be very good, for whatever size that you're at. If you're, say, at 30 or 40 units, that's great. But your growth is going to be stunted by that. Whereas if you're growing with that intentionality, or you're building those systems and saying, hey, we're going to be at 1,000 units in 2 years, or however long it's going to be, let's say, then you start putting those systems into place and the growth kind of happens as a consequence of that.
Yeah, because the CPA that is handling your 30 units, if you worked with the right one early and did your due diligence, will also be able to handle your 1,000 units. So same with your property management software or your bookkeeper, or the long list of people that you want on your team. It sucks to have to go find something when you need it. It's much easier just to have it available.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
some of these things are sticky too, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, like the property management software Appfolio, making a decision like that, you get really kind of stuck in those ecosystems, I guess. And it's tough to shift. So you want to make sure that you do those types of shifts as infrequently as possible, because it's never easy to just export a bunch of data from one property management system, import it into the next one, and it's a process, right? So you want to try to make sure that whatever you're doing is going to keep working for a long time, so you don't have to keep going through those transitions.
Yeah, and to bring that down like all the way to the personal level, think about how much it sucks to move. Like if you go buy a new house and you want to move all your stuff over there, like it sucks. Nobody likes moving. Dan, you just went through a move. Did you enjoy it?
I just bought all new stuff.
You just burned the rest. You just let it burn down and walked away. Yeah, because moving's no fun, but it's the same thing with your systems, with whether that's your property management or your CPA, like Greg's pointing out there. That's a great example. Like moving that stuff is not fun. It's not easy. And the fewer times that you can do that, if you can just find the right horse from the beginning to ride all the way to the end state, then that's great.
That's a great analogy.